Hello everyone, this is Sam Spade with the next tutorial in the Git and GitHub for GameMaker series. In this tutorial, we'll be talking about making local Git repositories. Repositories are a lot of things, but to start with, you can consider them to be backups. They really are a lot more than this, but when you're just getting started, it's an easy way to conceptualize them. Making a repository is incredibly easy. All you have to do is navigate to your GameMaker project folder, open Git. In Windows, I'll be using Git Bash here. In Mac, you'll use the terminal to navigate there. And then once you're in the folder, you just type git init. One command, very simple, and your Git repository has been created. Now, once you've created the repository, you can actually start committing to it. So now you would go into your GameMaker project, you would make some changes, and then you go back to the Git window, and we'll go over all of this. We'll actually demonstrate all of this in a moment. And you type git add period. The period here is the wildcard. It will add all of your files. You could also choose to just add a specific file, but generally that's not what you'll want to do. You'll want to commit all of your new changes, so you'll use git add period. But again, you could commit individual files here if you wanted to. Then you type git commit -m and in quotation marks your message. So to break this down a little bit, the word git will precede any git command. Commit is you telling GameMaker that you want to commit what you're doing. You don't actually need this portion right here, but if you don't put this portion right here in, you'll be taken to whatever editor you're set up in, where you have to type your message and then commit it that way. You may prefer to do that. I prefer to use the -m and then include your message in quotes. That'll be your commit message, and it will tell you in the future what your commit was for. So that's actually really it. Those three commands will allow you to create and then add and commit to your local repository and give you your backup. That's all it takes to have a working backup of your GameMaker project. Before we actually demonstrate this, there are a couple other commands that I think are worth knowing about. I use them all the time, and I think that if you get into the habit of using them, it will give you a better understanding of how Git is actually working when you're using it. The first is Git status. This will show you the state of your current work. It'll show you what files have been modified, what files have been added to the staging area, and what files have been committed. Git Log will display the commit history. This actually will give you way too much information. So you probably want to use Git Log -- pretty, plus some of the additional options of your choosing to format how this commit history looks. All right, let's actually switch over to GameMaker Studio 2 and Git and demonstrate some of this. Okay, I've created a brand new project here. To initialize our Git repository, we need to open up Git Bash. On Windows, you can very easily do that by going to wherever you've put your GameMaker Studio 2 project files. So for me, that's in Documents, GameMaker Studio 2. Then you can simply open that project, right-click, Git Bash here, and you should get a window like this. Now, if you're on Mac or you don't have the Git Bash here option, you will have to open up your terminal and then navigate to that folder. So I'm currently under my user directory, cd /documents, cd /GameMaker Studio 2. ls will list the folders inside. So will dir, at least in Git Bash. I find this more helpful because then you can do cd / highlight this, and in Git Bash, shift insert will paste and run. And now again, we're in the same folder. So you can see in both places, we're now in the exact same place. We only need one of those windows open, so I'll keep this window open. So there you go. That's how you get to your folder. It's actually probably the most complicated part, as you'll see. Now, next, let's talk about how to initialize your repository. Initializing your repository is very easy. All you need to do is to type git init. You've now initialized your repository. If I bring my folder back over and show hidden files, you can now see that there's a .git directory. This is essentially what handles all of your Git stuff in the background. We can now type git status and see that we both have a repository, but there's no commits yet. So let's add it just like we discussed. Git add period. That was unintentional, but you can see that I typed this incorrectly. It will give you the most similar commands. What I really want was git add period. There we go. Git status, just to check, see what it looks like. Now all of these things have been staged. And now git commit, message, initial commit. You will get this message if you haven't already configured your username and user email, but it's very easy to do so. You can see right here, it's giving me the commands. Git config, global user name is Sam Spade, game dev. Git config, global user email is Sam Spade, gamedev@gmail.com. And now I should be able to type git commit, initial commit. Everything is done. We can do git status, git log, and here we go. Here's our first commit. Here's our commit hash, which I'll talk about in a moment. We are the author. It's our name and our email, date, and our commit message. All right, let's make some changes. Our initial change is just going to be to add a couple objects. So I'll add object 1 and object 2. Let's come over here, git add, git commit, added 2 objects, git status. Once again, we're good. We can check this with git log. There we go. We have our initial commit and our second commit where we added 2 objects. Let's add just a few more objects, and let's come in here and add a little bit of code. We'll say under the step event, we'll title it object 3, and we'll just say if keyboard pressed space show message, you press the space bar. You can save it. You can come back to git bash. Now let's actually do a quick git status. You can see that we have some modified files. So again, we can add those files, check the status again. So now let's commit this one, git commit, added object 3, git status. So now let's look at the git log pretty. So git log is giving us all of these commits. Whoops, again, spelled it incorrectly. But as you can see, with even just a few commits, this is getting very verbose. So we might want to use git log pretty, and this is a pretty good one line. Now it's collapsed all of our commits into a single line for each commit. So we have our initial commit, added 2 objects, added object 3. We'll talk about head and master in another tutorial. For now, you can see that we have our commit message and the shortened version of the hash. So there you go. And that's really the simplest workflow you can have. You work, you commit, you work, you commit, you work, you commit, and it creates this list of versions where version 1 leads to version 2, version 3, version 4, and so on. This is all local. It doesn't require any type of internet backup, connection, server, etc. It's all local, and it's all inside of your GameMaker project file. So that's the simplest workflow, but of course for it to be useful, you actually have to know how to look back at your work. Once you have GitHub connected, this will be a lot easier because you'll be able to go on GitHub. You won't have to mess with anything in your local directory, but you can also do it in your local directory by using git checkout and then that hash that we talked about to revert to a different, but not necessarily earlier version. We'll talk about this more when we get to branches, but you can use git checkout branch. But Git can branch and have different versions going different places, and Git checkout can be used to switch to a branch or to a specific commit, regardless of where it is in the chain. The one thing I would suggest is at the moment, don't make any changes. You certainly can. There's nothing wrong with this in Git, but it will lead to some things that we haven't covered yet. So if you want to experiment with that, go ahead. But for the moment, I would say maybe just check out a couple different commits and then use Git checkout branch name, which by default is master. So git checkout master to return to the most recent thing that you've done. So let's say we want to check out the last commit. We've now checked out a different commit. And if we come over here to GameMaker Studio 2, you'll notice that our project file needs to be updated because GameMaker Studio 2 is looking at the folder and noticing that some things are different. So we could do 2 things here. If we click save, this would update our folder to look like what is currently in GameMaker Studio 2. But we don't want to do that. We actually want GameMaker Studio 2 to look like our folder. So for that, we're going to click reload, and now object 3 is gone. So if we actually say git checkout our initial commit, come back over here, reload. Again, we want the ID to look like the folder. Now we're all the way back to our initial project state. So if we say git log one line, So you can see it, we can type in these commands. We can see our current state. You can also notice that if we type in git status, we have a detached head. Now I'll explain what that means in a future tutorial, but for the moment, all you need to know is to get back to your latest commit. What you want to do is type git checkout master. We can type git log one line. There we go. Everything is back the way it used to be. Come back over here, reload. Nothing was lost. All of our code is still intact and everything is good. There's one last thing I want to cover. This is just a helpful tip. Let's make one more object. Let's type git add. And now let's just type git commit. If you don't type -m and then your message in quotations, you will get this screen. Now there are ways to configure Git to get a different type of screen, but this is what you get by default. And if you ever end up here, you're probably going to be very confused and unable to get out of it. The way you get out of this is you type I to enter insert mode. Then you type your message, added object 4. Then you type escape to exit insert mode. And then you type :WQ for write and quit, I believe. And now we can check git log one line. There we go. Here's our latest commit. So if you ever find yourself at that screen, it is I, type your message, escape, :WQ, hit enter. To avoid that screen, just remember to type -m and then your message in quotation marks. So to follow along, create a new GameMaker project, initialize a Git repository in that project, make a couple of commits in GameMaker, and then check out a couple different snapshots of those commits so you can get an idea of how it works. In summary, you create a repository with git init, you add to it with git add period, and then commit with git commit, where you can use -m and then your commit message, and you can use git status and git log to display information about the state and history of your Git repository, and you can easily switch between commits with git checkout. As always, the links in this slide will be below. You can find the source code as well, although what will really be useful here is creating the project yourself and walking through it. And that's it. Thanks for watching.